So if you haven't already, go to the raspberrypi.org website and do everything you need to get started. Install the OS, whatever you got to do to get your Raspberry Pi up and running. I assume most of you have gotten to that point. So what you want to do is go ahead and go to nodered.org and copy this upgrade script into the command line. And you're going to want to make sure you run this because not all versions of Node-RED installed on your OS from raspberrypi.org are going to be up to date. So go ahead and run that script. The first time you do it, it's going to take about 10 to 20 minutes. And then reboot after you do that. I already ran it here, so I'm just going to exit out. The next thing you're going to want to do is set a static IP address for your Raspberry Pi. So the way we're going to do that is get into the command line. And we're going to change the configuration. So you're going to type sudo nano etc dhcp cd.config. And what this will do is get us into the config file. And actually, when you scroll down, you'll see these lines commented out for the static IP address. So all you're going to do is basically delete that hashtag. And so I did it for these 3 lines. I got rid of the IP version 6 line. You don't really need that. And what I did is I put my IP address instead of using a .1, I used a .2 because a lot of the times our routers at home use a .1 and it's just a little easier. But you got to make sure that your Modbus I/O and your block and your Raspberry Pi are on the same subnet. So once we're done making these changes, we're going to go ahead and hit Control X. We're going to save the modified buffer, and then we're going to go ahead and hit Enter. So now that we have set our static IP address on the Raspberry Pi, we got to make sure we set the IP address on the Modbus I/O. So we're going to exit out of here. You can use a lot of different Modbus I/O, but we're going to use Turk. So Turk has a web-based interface to change the IP address settings. So you're going to go ahead and change your IP address so it's on the same interface as your Raspberry Pi. You're going to hit Submit, and then you're going to reset and make sure that IP address takes. So make sure you write this down somewhere. Next, what we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to launch Node-RED. Make sure that's running. We're going to go to our browser and we're going to type in 127.0.0.1:1880. And 127 is just a loopback address. So what it does is it just makes sure that it's always going to come back to your device's IP address. And Node-RED just runs on port 1880. So it's going to go ahead and load the flows. And then the first thing you're going to do in your flow is go to your palette manager. And you're going to go ahead and install the Modbus node. This one right here. And whoop, looks like it reset on me there. Alright, so you're going to go to your palette manager. And you're going to go to Install, and you're going to type Modbus. And you're going to go ahead and install this node. I already installed it. And then the other node you're going to want to install is Dashboard, which is this node right here. So go ahead and install those two. And once you have those installed, now we're going to do our flow. So the first thing you're going to do is go down to Switch. You're going to drag this and drop it onto the flow. And going to go ahead and configure it. What you're going to need to do is configure a group name and configure a tab. So make sure you do that. Name them whatever you want. We'll go ahead and update that and update that. And then what you're going to want to do is make sure your payload is, true and false is okay for this one. So we're going to go ahead and click done. Next thing we're going to do is drop a Modbus write onto the flow. And we're going to make that little connection right there. And then we're going to configure our Modbus write node. The name, I'm going to say Turk output 1. We're going to use function code 5 for our Modbus. We're going to start at address 0. And you're going to have to go ahead and set up this as well. And as you can see, I already did it. And this is where you're going to want to put in the IP address. So we're going to type in 192.168.2.16. Click update. And there it is. And you're going to want to go ahead and click deploy. And as you can see, we're connected, which I'll show you later on the video. And to get access to this switch, what you're going to want to do is type in the same IP address with the same port, but hit /UI. And this gives you a nice Node-RED user interface. And so now you have this switch right here, and as you can see, when you click it, it sends a 1 to the Modbus I/O, and it turns the light on. So that is how it's done. That is how you make your Raspberry Pi communicate via Modbus to some factory automation or industrial automation I/O.